thought it might do.
Yeah, I was actually speaking to a good friend of yours as well, Martin, Tom Gabor, and he was telling me the Toyota guys are taking this particularly seriously, and they were saying that they are just using this as an opportunity to put the drivers through the usual process that they would do on a week at Le Mans, and that is doing all the team briefings and all the practice that they would usually do, and then of course at the end of it the 24-hour race. So as much as they would like to throw everything at this and try and win it, they're more focusing on the race in September.
And of course, all of our pro drivers who are used to racing at Le Mans, and the Toyota drivers very much fall into that category, will be getting out after their stint. I was just about to say out of the car, getting out of their rig after their stint. They will be having a debrief with the team on one of the chat clients that they're using, and then they will go away, they will hydrate, they will take the normal sort of fluids and eat the food that they would normally be given by the team physio. They'll have exactly the same plan. They'll have meal prepped for the entire race during the week, and then they will go away and get their rest exactly in the same manner that they will do in Le Mans in September, that they did do in Le Mans in June last year, and a year before, and a year before, and a year before. And it's really critical that they do that, because otherwise they are going to not be able to perform on Sunday the way that they should be. Little problem here for our race leader, Max Verstappen, he appears to have found the headlight switch again. He had no lights there. And this is like when you see a car driving off a petrol forecourt that's brightly lit, and he doesn't realise he hasn't got any lights on because the petrol forecourt is brightly lit and everything works. Max there coming down the pit straight probably didn't realise he had no lights on. When he got up over the Dunlop Bridge and suddenly it went dark, my lights are broken. Oh no, I've somehow turned them off on a button on the steering wheel.
I've got to say, Raffaele Marcello still putting in fantastic pace, by the way. He's brought the gap down to 8 seconds. But yeah, just a slight issue there for Max Verstappen, but everything back to normal again now. And I wonder if this is going to be something he's getting a little bit concerned about, Martin. That gap is still coming down. Clearly, Raffaele Marcello is pushing very hard. This is information that will be fed to Max Verstappen all the time. I wonder if the Red Line team are going to be getting just slightly concerned at the pace that the Rebellion car is showing at this stage.
Yeah, you would think, because, you know, we've got 3 Rebellion Williams cars in the top 10 out of their 4 cars, so they're all performing well. They've got good speed, they've stayed out of trouble predominantly, and the Rebellion Williams team is, you know, it's come loaded for bear. You know, they're not just here to make up the numbers. They haven't entered 4 cars because they can. They've entered 4 cars to get up 4 stunning lineups, and that's how they've managed to get the cars in. Bear in mind, we're starting 50 cars here. There were 10 in the reserve list. So there are 10 good, really good quality professional racing driver, sim racing driver lineups who didn't get into the race. So there's an awful lot more people that would like to be doing this, who are frustratedly watching it and going, oh, look how good it is. It's better than I even thought it was going to be. Oh, really frustrated not to be in. To be in a reserve list in a team, and obviously they've done all the training and the setup and everything else in case there's some emergency and they get in. That's really frustrating. But for Max Verstappen, no racing driver wants to lose the lead during his stint. But big plan, it's win at 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, not win at 3 minutes past midnight on Sunday morning. So if he has to let Raffaele Marcello go for whatever reason it is, then he will have to let him go for whatever reason it is. And again, as always in motor racing, it's hard to find out until after the post, when people then finally start to tell you the reasons that things have happened. So, you know, there's always a lot of conjecture. What is unavoidable now is that Raffaele Marcello is quicker at the moment than Max Verstappen. Jenson Button in the pit lane. What's the time now? It's midnight here, and they're 3 o'clock in the afternoon in LA, 9 hours behind us, in front of us, behind us. So Jenson Button, middle of the afternoon there, handing the team car over. So that's been a driver change as well. And Chris, a lot of the teams were telling us, even in daylight and good track conditions, there wasn't enough advantage in trying to double stint tyres over the time that you would take in the pit stop to change tyres, either in GT, we believe, or certainly in LMP2. So and with no tyre restriction on the number of tyres or the kind of tyres you can run, basically fresh rubber, fuel tank of fuel, go, go, go.
Yeah, that's it. You know, what it was is the difference between the length of time to not change tyres and to change tyres as well was a time that you were going to be able to make up. So if you just put those soft tyres up, then you're going to be quicker. So there is absolutely no advantage in going for that quicker stop because you're going to make that time up anyway.
Drivers are going to have to get out of that habit, because when we go to Le Mans in September, they won't have 400 sets available to them. So they're going to have to really, that's where tyre management is going to be a massive, massive part of the race. And talked about this a little bit earlier. If the weather is good, then the ambient temperature will be lower, the track temperature will be lower, they'll be running softer tyres for longer, medium tyres for longer, probably not need to dig into the hard tyre at all for the race. And certainly the men from Goodyear reckon that if it doesn't rain for sustained periods or there's not long red flags, then September's Le Mans might be the fastest ever, and that is a phenomenally mouth-watering prospect. We're thinking it's going to be darker for longer, there might be more accidents, it might rain for longer, but on the plus side, Goodyear reckon definitely it could be one of the fastest ever run Le Mans, because they're running softer tyres and faster tyres as a result for much longer.
And just a point to raise, you know, the guys are getting new rubber every single stop, so that means they cannot take their foot off the gas. So this is going to be the most physically demanding 24-hour Le Mans they have ever taken part in, and they're not even in a car. So how hard is that to get your head around? You know, and I can tell you from experience, driving a rig is really physically demanding. You'll get out of that thing sweating buckets, and Jenson Button even said in an interview that he got even more nervous doing virtual races, and it was just as physically demanding for him. Now imagine being told, you know, for the 4 or 7 hours that you do, you have to be foot on the floor every single lap. Usually, Martin, as you know, during this stage of the race, they would probably tell the drivers, right, you can go at 60, 70%, 80%. The most amount of saving or time saving that they're going to be doing, is just going to be lifting and coasting into the Mulsanne chicanes just to save a little bit of fuel.
Well, the one thing that every real-world driver who has been sim racing during lockdown has told me is that it is all mental.
Yeah.
In a race car, as you know from your karting experience, you feel things and your body tells you things. Your brain doesn't have to react. Your instincts make you react. It's a flinch in the same way that, you know, you defend yourself, your head, if something comes flying at you. And those are hardwired in over laps after laps after laps after laps. But this is all done mentally. You don't have that feel of what the car's doing. You have to use your brain to translate what you're seeing into what you're, quote, feeling and reacting to that. And again, it's the repetition that the sim racers have got of that over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of doing it that has made them so hardwired into these games. And the real-world drivers, well, Andre Lotterer just posted a little video after his stint getting out the Porsche. He looked like he'd done 18 hours in the car. He was just shattered, and admitted he was shattered mentally. It's going to be a very different race from anything our real-world drivers have ever done. Physically, that's the issue perhaps for some of our sim race drivers, because they don't habitually do lots of 24-hour. We don't habitually do lots of 24-hour races, but the pro teams and the pro drivers have perhaps more backup in keeping body and soul together. And a lot of the sim racers will have some of that, but perhaps not to quite the same extent. So, yeah, the real-world drivers, they're getting beaten up in the skull, definitely, by all of this.
Well, some of the sim teams, people like Veloce or Williams, for example, they will make the drivers train, and if they are not doing all that training, then they will be kicked out of that team. So they have to reach a certain level of fitness to remain in that team. Now, some of the esports drivers, they don't really have to do that. So they might do a little bit of training, but they don't have to. And if they don't do that training, all they're going to be doing is getting in the rig. And one thing I would say is that a lot of these esports drivers, they do a lot of 24-hour races. I'd say it's the opposite. I'd say the esports drivers have done more 24-hour races than these guys, because guess what? They can do it every single weekend if they want to. And there's so many races in esports, Martin. You wouldn't believe how many different championships there are. It is so hard to keep up with. Even if you're not in a championship, you can just go on with your mates and say, let's have a 24-hour race.
Well, actually, that is a very valid point. Never mind every weekend. They could do one every day. I mean, not actually every day, but you can do it any day that you want to, and that's absolute. You could race Le Mans once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, every week of the year, 52 weeks of the year. We get 1 week a year on this track. Yep. And even then, they're not on it on Friday or Monday or Tuesday. So they get Wednesday and Thursday and then Saturday and Sunday. That's 4 days a year, and they don't even on Wednesday and Thursday have a full day on the track. So yeah, time on this track is very, very limited. In the real world, as you say, in the sim world, that's entirely different. I told this story earlier on. Michi Hoyer, who's working with IDEX Sport, who are in the team here, he's their sim pro, who was only drafted into the team last week. He was, after the test race a couple of nights ago, he went straight to Indy to do some open throttle running at maximum speed to check what effects certain changes of the car had on top speed. Well, try doing that in the real world. Right, we've just finished night session at Le Mans, just off to Indy for a couple of hours running wide open. No, none of that happens in the real world. So there's all sorts of things that you can do in the sim world that allow you to really accelerate the pace of progress. Ooh, what are we seeing here? A little bit of a replay. 3 cars looking for the same bit of tarmac. And the Toyota, the Toyota came to a very abrupt halt in front of the TDS car.
I think that was a slowdown. Lewis mentioned this to you earlier, where your car can stop in the game and then glitch back again. It's something that has come up in the game. We saw it happen to Charles Leclerc earlier, and Lewis said to me when we came off air for the concert, he said that can be very, very dangerous, and I think we have just seen why. I think that is what the rFactor 2 guys out there will call a slowdown in the game, where the car on your screen basically stops. You're still going forward, but then when the game comes back to you again, the car just jumps back. And if there's a car there, then you're going to take them out.
Exactly right. And look at the way the car is crabbing.
Yeah. And this is exactly...
I think it was the WRT car that actually ran into the back of the Toyota. I'm assuming it was one of the Toyotas, but that actually doesn't look either like WRT or a Toyota. Leaders are in the pit lane, by the way, so the race lead battle in the pits. It'll be interesting to see who comes back out. Meanwhile, quick shout out to the pit crew online, Pit Crew 24, and Chris Lord, who has been watching the race, and just mentions, as we probably ought to pay attention, that Rob Wickens is in the race in the 67 Marler Racing team car. So Robert Wickens, the Canadian driver, along with Ferdy Habsburg. He's one of the 2 real-world drivers in that car. So Rob Wickens in the car from home in Canada. And great to see him able to partake in racing again, considering the challenges that he's had. There is the Marler team, Aston Martin. And that won the very first test race. So they had a really good start to this build-up to Le Mans. Hasn't been quite as much on the pace in the race, but again, we're not even close to halfway through yet. So plenty of racing left to go, as we will say, until about 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Well, I was being told, actually, when I was on my break, that the Marler team have had a really, really difficult first period in this race. And Jimmy Broadbent, who's part of that team, who was actually live streaming, they had a really messy handover at one stage as well, where a driver out on track got a little bit of damage came in, and they had to do a driver swap. And Jimmy Broadbent, he wasn't ready, and he's live on stream, and everyone's watching him furiously trying to get ready to then jump in the car to take over. But the Marlow team, it has not been a very good race for them so far. Lots of problems so far.
So in fact, that was the Team Penske Acura car. So that was that the same incident? Was it the Penske that suddenly glitched and got hit? I think it must have been, rather than the Toyota.
Perhaps it looked like the Toyota. I'm sure we both agree that was the one that jumped back, and I think they went into the path of the Penske, and I think the Penske has come off a lot worse out of that.
Well, that's certainly got a lot of damage. It'll be heading back to the pits. And the good news here is that in rFactor 2, you can repair anything. But, as in real world, the bigger the repair, the bigger the cost in time lost. So that's a tough break for Team Penske, Roger Penske's crew. We heard from Roger early on. We heard from Juan Pablo Montoya. They had a drama, didn't they, when Simon Pagenaud, the Indy 500 champion, was at the wheel. His steering packed up. When you think, okay, well, that was the end of it. No, because he unplugged his rig and seat and frame, rolled it away from the monitor and the PC, and rolled in another one that he had borrowed from a friend for the weekend and plugged it in, because not only had he had the foresight to borrow an entire new rig, and clearly has trained on it because he'd set up the force feedback and everything else, but he'd also plugged it, he'd rehearsed fast changeovers and where the plugs go, and instead of just ripping wildly and stuff as you and I would normally do, of course. So, I mean, that level of preparation has not been rewarded with much in the way of good fortune, I'm afraid, for Team Penske, and things aren't going too well for them again. So, yeah, that was a bit of a tough break. Max Verstappen stayed in the number 20 red line car. He still leads from, oh look, Raffaele Marcello stayed in as well, and Ollie Rowland has just come out of the pits in the 2Cs Motorsport car. He's up to third. Jack Aitken down to fourth. So didn't notice whether that happened before the pit stop or during the pit stop, but Ollie Rowland back up to third, top three covered by 16 seconds.
Now, we were talking about the Marlow team there, as we can see.
Now, there's the WRT car. I thought that was the one that did the hitting. I thought that was the car that ran into the back of the car that glitched, and initially I thought it was a Toyota that had glitched. Maybe it was, because is that a Toyota further back in the pit lane? Hard to tell at that distance. 22 for United Autosports is in, but maybe it wasn't a Toyota, maybe it was the Penske that's crabbing. That suggests a rear impact, so it may have been the Penske that glitched and the WRT car that hit him, although that is the 8 Toyota in the garage. The Wolves Gulf Racing Porsche comes in as well. Yeah, so it was Dries van Tor in the Team WRT car. He is in the pit lane. Who else is in the pit lane? Sebastian Buemi is in the number 8. He leaves now. That's the Toyota Gazoo racing car. And Larry Tenford coming in for TDS has come and gone. So I would assume that he was not involved in that. But looking further back, Team Penske, Ricky Taylor came in and is still in the pits. That could be a long stop for them.
Was just going to say, Martin, just had some info in from Jimmy Broadbent from the Marlow team, and he's just said they've just had an issue pop up, and quite an interesting one as well. Rob Wickens, who's out there, his force feedback on his steering wheel is stuck at nearly 100%, and he's one-handed through the corners because of his braking with his right hand. Now, he's on an adapted steering wheel, so that everything he's doing is on the steering wheel, and he's having to go one-handed now through corners as well. But having the force feedback stuck at 100%, that is going to be incredibly uncomfortable. I've tried that out, not out of choice, I can tell you as well, not because I wanted to, and it is really, really difficult. And Rob Wickens, this is going to be physically a very, very demanding stint for him now.
Yeah, and it's going to be like trying to drive the car with 2 flat tires and trying to get it. I mean, it really is, you know, like the wheels are in concrete. That's going to be brutal. So how many laps has he been out in the car? I'm afraid I can't tell you from our data screen, and Chris and I haven't had haven't had the memo and the course to interrogate our timing data screen. We need Alan McNish for that. So, but whatever. I would think that however long into this stint he is, it can't end soon enough for Rob Wickens in the 67 Marla Racing Corvette, because he's going to want somebody else to take over, and then he's going to have to fix his force feedback. And again, you know, he's going to have to do that for himself, chances are, because he's not with a big team. So I'm not sure who's with him this weekend, but that might not be as easy a fix as it is for an able-bodied driver.
And then it's the issue of what is causing that. You know, it might be a Control-Alt-Delete job, I don't know. But if there's something that is going to be terminally wrong with that steering wheel, does he then have another one he can get out and replace that, for example? So I'm not too sure exactly what the problem is, but I imagine Jimmy will keep me updated. Yeah,
definitely. Richard Westbrook in the pit lane, Danny Juncadella in the pit lane as well. Aston Martin Racing, Richard Westbrook in 5th place in the 95 car, Danny Juncadella in 4th place for RGA Esports in the Corvette. 3rd place, also just leaving the pits, Matt Backham, another of the Porsche Esport team drivers. 2nd and 1st out on track in GTE, Neil Jarni for Porsche Esports in the 91, and still leading, former overall outright race winner at Le Mans, Nick Tandy in the 93 Porsche. You're looking at the leaderboard. Top 18 cars are all in the LMP2 class. Don't expect the GTE cars to get up there into the top 20. I think that is highly unlikely in this. There is a massive rate of attrition with 30 LMP2 cars starting. They are all still, now that they're running again, ahead of the GTE field. So even Ryan Tvita in the much delayed Veloce Esports 3 car, 20 laps back, he is still ahead of the GTE leader. And Tvita in and out of the pit lane for a regular stop. Ricky Taylor still in the pit lane, should really have noted when he went in, but then that would mean that I would also have to have noticed him leaving. But that, one thing we can be sure of, that's not going to be a short stop. He is the only prototype in the pits, though. So Dries van Tor has just left. That was a long stop for them, but at the moment, it hasn't cost them an additional lap. They are 2 laps off the lead, but now they're the first car that is 2 laps off the lead. I think that did cost them a lap. They've dropped behind IDEC Sport. Michi Hoyer is at the wheel of IDEC Sport's number 17 car in 17th place and 17th in class, all the 17s. That's some kind of bingo call, isn't it?
There we go.
Yeah, there we go, indeed. All right, let's pick out the wheat from the chaff in these pair of headlights. What's the battle that's 1100s apart? That's 31 leading 0-3, isn't it? That's the only tight battle in LMP2, or the only battle in LMP2 that is as tight as that. Verstappen and Marcello have gone out from 3 to 4 seconds apart. Verstappen's got more pace now. And this is the 56 Art car from Team Project One, being passed pretty easily by the Cinetic Alpine Elf car, and then, whoa, losing his bearings. And that will happen in real life as well. Somebody comes whistling by for a fraction, you're slightly distracted, and you're a tenth late on the brake pedal, and suddenly you're going in many kilometers an hour quicker than you want to, and then you're off at Indianapolis. And that is not a place that's kind on mistakes. It's taking the rear wing off the car as well.
The only thing that's different in sim racing is no one is taking that rear wing home with them and using it as an adapted coffee table.
Yeah, absolutely right. The other thing that I'm missing, because this is virtual Le Mans, is that you can't smell the barbecues or hear the fireworks going off during and after the concert from the campsite. So there's that as well. Also not waking up in a caravan at 6 in the morning, courtesy of the Army helicopter, and having a cold shower. There, I'm not missing that much so much.
Now, Verstappen, the gap between Verstappen and Marcello has just plummeted down to 1 second, so it's dropped by 3 seconds. So Verstappen, whether that was caught up in traffic or a big mistake somewhere, but Marcello will now be in the tow of Verstappen. I'm not too sure. I don't think that's the battle we're seeing on screen at the moment, but they are getting very close on circuit.
Yeah, they are very close together. So 2.5 seconds is the margin at the moment between Max Verstappen in car number 20 and car number 1, Raffaele Marcello for Rebellion Williams Esport. There is the orange livery on the side of the number 20 car. Has he got damage on the nose? Or is that just the slightly darker colour at the front of the car because the headlights aren't illuminating it?
Well, if there was damage, that might...
No, it's not.
No,
it was.
okay.
No, there's it ran under the lights there. You could see quite clearly that. I mean, you don't see much damage either, but he's either outbraked himself into somewhere or got held up really badly in traffic. And actually, that'll take a second out of your lap easily. If you get a GT car into that chicane, for instance, that'll cost you a second. So as we ride on board now, car in front is an awful lot closer than it was.
Well, I actually had people, drivers telling me earlier in the week that because they're in LMP2 cars, the speed difference, isn't as excessive as it would be, if you're in an LMP1 car. Yeah. So if you get stuck behind a oh, there we go. There's someone off.
Now that was a glitch because we were riding on board and we had turned successfully into Mulsanne corner and then we hadn't. What I was really interestedly noticing was look at the dark filth on that left-hand front wing. There's Alan McNish was talking about the clouds of midges that are in the lake just beside the kink on the Mulsanne Straight that sort of splatter across your windscreen. That level of detail may not be in R-Factor 2, but an awful lot of distancing is now. That is a problem for Verstappen. Yeah. He's glitching. That's who we were riding with. I couldn't identify it from those front ponton wings. And Raffaele Marcello was the car that ran into the back of him. Now, is it him or is it the server overall that is glitching? Because that was definitely an issue and that has cost Max Verstappen the lead. That's 2 offs. And he got hit from behind as well. I
don't know if he's carrying some damage there. Because it looks like the car was slightly unstable. Oh! There we go, spin.
Yep. Well, that is the long-term effect of being hit from behind. Something else has added to that damage. He's turned left there at high speed. That's the first left at speed of any note after Arnage, and the car didn't turn, so something has broken, and Max Verstappen has lost the lead and will be heading to the pits. It's not reflected on your timing screen yet, but it is on ours. Now Raffaele Marcello leads.
Now, down the straight, you could see he was having to correct the front, so he was definitely carrying maybe some sort of suspension damage there, and then trying to carry the same amount of speed into the Porsche curves. Well, the wall is not too far away when you're going through the Porsche curves as well, and that's a huge moment in this race. Red line picking up damage there after an incident, and that's going to be Max Verstappen into the pit lane.
Yep, that's a real tough break, but again, only half the race down, not even. We've got 14 hours, 14 and a half hours. We've only done 9.5 hours of racing, so there's a long way to go. You can recover. I think coming in front of him, was that by Colles, or that's the Rocket Sports cars? That's Jenson Button's team, isn't it, coming in? And luckily for Max, it was in the Porsche curves rather than at the beginning of the Mulsanne Straight or in the S's just after you start the lap.
Nowhere's handy to go off, but no. If you're going to go off, then why not do it near the Porsche curves? And speaking of the Porsche curves, just before that incident happened, one thing I was going to say is the LMP cars are really going to struggle to get past the GTE cars. If you're not past the GT cars before you get to the Porsche curves, then you might not pass them again until the Ford chicane. Yep. So that's something that's really going to play effect throughout the night.
Misidentified that car coming into the pits. My first thought was, oh, that's Tom Dillman, and it was in fact Tom Dillman who came into the pits in car number 4. It's our pole sitters by Colles Burst Esports, and in fact Tom Dillman on that final lap setting a purple first sector. So that was his fastest lap of the stint and the fastest first sector of the entire race by anybody.
Well, I don't know if that's going to be Tom Dillman out the car, but if he knows he's about to go off for a kip, then he wants to get back as quickly as possible.
Well, again, ambient temperatures coming down, so the air is slightly denser and slightly damper maybe in the kind of dew of the evening. So that gives you a fraction more power. And as the heat goes out from the day from the tarmac, then you get better grip from the soft tyre. So again, perfect conditions, and it's always sort of around the end of qualifying towards midnight, either on the Wednesday or Thursday, that we see the absolute fastest practice laps at Le Mans. Flash of the headlights there for the car in front from Ollie Rowland. And there is the 51 Ferrari in the pits, right in front of one of the Toyotas, I think. Is that...
That's a little bit cheeky.
That's the number 7 car. Well, you've got to get into your pit box, and if they're in the next pit box, in fact, it wasn't, it's one of the Porsches. But we've seen there is another car. I think we've seen this before with the number 8 Toyota of Sebastian Buemi, and that is the 7 car, and that was being driven by Mike Conway, now changing over to Jose Maria Lopez. Corvette comes out. So which of the GT Corvettes is that? That's Tommy Milner in 64. You can hear the rumble as it comes out of the pit lane in our ears. You can hear the rumble of the Corvette V8 motor.
Well, I think
I'm loving this so much.
I think the Ferrari will get away with that because that was Redline, the other car, and they're they're obviously fixing damage. But, but Martin, have you ever, you've commentated on the Le Mans 24 Hours several times. Have you ever forgotten that you were almost commentating on a virtual race? I mean, the difference is, of course, we're in a big studio. You're not track side. But have you ever been watching these pictures now and going, for a split second, going, this is the real Le Mans?
Well, yes, quite a lot of the time you get so immersed in it, you don't think that it's not the real Le Mans. But the first part, actually, you said, have you ever forgotten that you're not watching a real race? But we are watching a real race, and that's the thing of it is, it doesn't matter what we're racing, we are racing. There are real people racing these cars, and really seriously. There's the number 20 car, so Redline have fixed whatever it was relatively quickly, and that was the number 7 Toyota behind. So Jose Maria Lopez comes out behind the delayed Max Verstappen. Is Max staying in on the outlap 20? Yes, he is. So Pichito Lopez taking over the number 7 car is in 17th. Max comes out in 13th, but he's a lap ahead and a few inches. And here is why I'm guessing we're going to see again. Now, this is not a replay, is it? So this is back to the Porsche curves and another battle. And thank you for turning sideways under the lights. That's the 12 car of Mad Max Papis. So Max Papis, IndyCar racer and IMSA racer, racing for MPI Zancho. So that's MPI's the Spanish team, right? And Zancho teaming up with them. So Max Papis having a big high-speed lose there in the Porsche curves. That would have been a proper Code Brown moment in real life, but gets away with that with no more than some subtly placed Italian cursing to himself, I'm sure.
Yep, MPI Sancho teaming up with, of course, the MPI teaming up with Sancho, the esports team, big esports team as well. They've got plenty of drivers dotted around the grid. Of course, Team Rocket, Jenson Butler's team, also teaming up with the Sancho team for this event as well. And they've been doing very well in the Virtual Endurance Championship on the build-up to this Team Zancho. So great to see them dotted all around the grid in the 24-hour Le Mans Virtual.
On board with Jose Maria Lopez, chasing Max Verstappen. Again, sentences you don't often get to say. That's right in there with those, isn't it? Grand Prix driver versus 3-time World Touring Car champion and Le Mans racer now for Toyota Gazoo Racing. Little further up the road, coming down into Indianapolis. That's the battle, I think, between the Senior Tech car that has just left the pits, the 36 car that is here in our studio, although the driver, Thomas Laurent, is not here in our studio. Pierre Rag has been driving the car here. And Laurent wheel to wheel. Again, struggling. Is that absolutely the Senior Tech car? I'm not entirely convinced that I've spotted that right in the darkness. Past him goes number 2. So that's not. So that's a battle. Is that a battle for position? Yeah, so that's Cool Racing, in fact, and Rebellion Williams, number 2 car. So again, that is a pair of sim racing pros. So it's not Thomas Laurent, it is in the Cool Racing car. So number 2 for Williams, that's Devon Rochik, the Polish driver, one of their 2 sim racing drivers. He's picked up a spot, he's moved into 19th. And in the 42 car, So Eric Barbier, Erwan Barbier, the Frenchman who shares that car, with Nico Lapierre and Antonin Borga, the real racing drivers, and Maxime Scalabrini.
David actually did a 24-hour race around this circuit on R-Factor 2 last year and got a podium there as well, so I'm sure he would be happy if he could try and repeat that again, albeit in the 24-hour Le Mans virtual.
Oh, look at this. This is classic Le Mans stuff. The cool racing car there, just giving a little side swipe to the 67 Marla Corvette. So that's back out to the pit lane. Rob Wickens came in 4 or 5 minutes ago with that car.
And they've swapped.
And they have, yeah, it's Jimmy Broadbent. Yeah, you were talking about Jimmy Broadbent not quite being ready for a stint. Just as well, he was streaming online, just as well he hasn't got many followers, just 490-odd thousand, nearly 500,000 followers. I'm sure they weren't all tuned in, though, watching his embarrassment as he rushed to get into the rig.
Oh, but many of them will make everyone will remember it. There will be gifs sent out there of all sorts, because Jimmy Broadbent does not get away with anything, I can tell you that now.
Not in this commentary he doesn't. Every bus that's come along, Jimmy Broadbent has been pushed firmly under it. It was like a 10-minute roasting from Ben earlier on. Hair, birthday, I mean, I don't know what else was going on. I feel for Jimmy Broadbent, and I don't even know the man.
I can make up for this now, because I've got to say, huge congratulations to Jimmy Broadbent. He has just reached 500,000 subscribers.
I thought you were going to say YouTube. Half a century. I thought you were going to really give him a kicking for his age as well.
Well, happy birthday to him, and well done. Congratulations to him. He's on 500k subscribers. So there we go. Have I taken a few buses off him?
I'm not sure that helped, really, to be honest. Look at this. This is classic Le Mans. Multi-class racing. 4 different cars from 4 different teams battling for the same piece of tarmac. 2 in GT. And this is the birthday boy, Jimmy Broadbent, from Marla Racing Team. He's behind the 56 Porsche. That's fresh out of the pits, Lawrence Hoare. And that is the purple Team Wins car livery. That's the one that is normally driven in the World Endurance Championship. Not necessarily in that colour, actually. Those are the colours of last year's Ford, the 67, the Wins Ford that raced in the first and only time a Ford GT has raced at Le Mans in privateer hands in the modern era. But Lawrence Hoare, who raced last year in Road to Le Mans, he was racing an LMP3 car on Thursday and on Saturday morning before the main race. He was in that support race. So Lawrence Hoare in the Team Project 1 car. And Ben Keating, who will be watching, I'm sure, at home in Texas, having probably completed yet another 100-kilometre cycle ride up through the mountains. Ben Keating, like everybody else, doing an awful lot of training. He's been on his bike more than ever. So Ben, I'm sure, is watching with great interest the Wins car. That's the livery he brought back to Le Mans last year. The Wins people were super excited to be back at Le Mans after many years. And I know Ben will be watching this, just chewing at his fist, wishing he were in a real race car again. So Keating car guy, man, have a great weekend, and please don't come back looking like you're some kind of Greek Adonis. I know he will. He's been on the bike. He's been personal best busting. He said he's never been as fit in his life. And these racing drivers, you know, it'll be 6 months since they're in an endurance car. Now, never mind till we get to Le Mans in September or August at Spa. These guys, I did joke actually with their physio from Jota, we were chatting the other day. I said, when they turn sideways on the grid, they're all going to disappear.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be so ripped, these guys. And, you know, their nutrition, their training, they've never had so much time to be fit. So, you know, all of them, every single man jack of them are just going to be buzzing to get back into cars, but they will never have been fitter.
They're definitely going to have no problem in the FI World Endurance Championship getting to the end of races, aren't they? They're going to be as physically fit at the end of it as they would at the start of it. And that's going to make it very interesting, actually, because all the drivers are perhaps going to be in the best shape that they have ever been or ever been over in recent years. So everyone's going to be raring to go. And, of course, we can see the drivers have been using events like this, the 24-hour Le Mans Virtual, to get themselves ready for it. So it's going to be interesting to see whether the drivers that have been using this are going to then gain an advantage when they get back in the car again, whether them competing in races has been able to keep them sharp, and when they jump back in the car, if that's been able to benefit them.
Lots of interesting comments from various different fans, new fans and old fans alike on Twitter. One of them are just Rory Bevitt. I don't know where Rory is watching from, but here's what he said. It looks like that even in the virtual world, Le Mans is still that cold-hearted woman, in that what she gives, she takes away just like that. And Max is finding that out. Well, we always say, you don't win Le Mans. Le Mans chooses who gets to win. There is a phenomenal amount of fate and luck and fortune involved. And as Toyota proved in 2016, even with one lap to go, Le Mans can be a brutally cruel mistress. So yes, it can give and it can take away, but it can do it the other way around. It can take away and then it can reward perseverance in the end. It's not done. Again, as 2016 proved, never give up. They're 12th now. They're still on the lead lap, car number 20. It is not done.
Definitely not, and all they need to do is try and keep their head up. The engineers, the guys in the background, Max Verstappen's teammates, have got to just try and keep him motivated. I don't think Max is going to need a lot of that, because Max Verstappen is definitely one of those drivers. You can tell by his personality off the circuit that he is definitely not someone that would ever throw in the towel, but that's going to have to be the same for everyone else who then jumps in the car. I think what they have to do, Martin, is just forget about where they are now. 12th place is where they are, but let's forget that. We are just doing our own thing. We're out here having a practice session. These are the times we want to require. This is how quickly we want to get back into the pits, and let's just keep doing that, and then at the end, let's see where Le Mans rewards us.
Okay, Max is in again. Whatever was the issue, it was a short pit stop, and this will be something that you do see at Le Mans. An immediate fix, get the car out. Max, just do what you can while we have a think about what we really need to do and how deep we need to delve into this and how long the next stop needs to be. Has it fixed it? No, guys. I'm still putting it in the wall at every corner. Okay, here we go. Let's get you back in. So this might be a little bit of a longer stop, I'm afraid, for Max Verstappen. The car coming in from 13th spot. But we'll have to wait and see just how far he drops down the order. Already starting to slip, because Owen Murphy has gone by him in the 16 Veloce Esports 2 car. That was the next one across the line, so they're going to continue to lose places. Michi Hoyer next up for IDEC Sport, and he was only a minute behind as Max came into the pit, so that will cost them a spot as well. Let's take a little look at our GTE class. Before I do, I want to have a quick shout out to one of the fastest starters in the world of bobskeleton, ice slider Marcus Wyatt from Great Britain. He's watching with great interest. And a former fellow slider of his, Greg West, watching as well from Vermont in the States. Greg involved with the iRacing platform. And Leslie Stratton, who slides for Sweden, also watching there with him. Let's get into our GTE class. Tommy Østgaard leading in the 93 car now. The Norwegian driver for the Porsche Esports team, ahead of Mac Backham, another of their esports pros in the 92 car. And Neil Jarni in third place, 91 car. And Neil Jarni, not overly familiar with the Porsche 911 RSR. Of course, he was one of Porsche's real-world LMP1 hybrid drivers, but not overly familiar perhaps with the GTE car. But as the race has progressed, that has become, it seems, less of an issue, and his pace is coming right up to par.
Yeah, you don't need to be going out there setting purple sectors, as you know, Martin. You just need to be setting a respectable pace, and then you need to be setting that respectable pace consistently. You've got the sim drivers. They're the ones that are going to go in for you and effectively win you the race with the quick lap times that they're going to go put in and the brilliant stints that they'll put in. For Neel Jani, his stint is all about just being consistent, because Neel Jani may not be able to go out there and put in times to go and win the race because he's not a sim racer, but he can lose them the race. And at the moment, I'd say he's doing everything he needs to do. That might sound weird to the viewers at home when I say that, when they might say, Neel Jani can't win them the race, and two guys I've never heard of can. Yes, that is genuinely the case. We're watching a Pro-Am class, but flip that round.
Yep.
And at the moment, they're doing great. This is fantastic from Porsche. 1, 2, and 3. Yep. There is a long way to go, and we've just seen how quickly things can change with Team Redline there. We're not even halfway through the race, but I'd say the Porsche engineers, and there is plenty of them involved in this, at the moment are going to be very, very pleased.
Now, what we haven't seen just now, but has popped up on our timing screen, is a change in the battle for 6th position. Dennis Lind in the 64 Corvette has just been bumped, well, not necessarily bumped, but overtaken for 6th position by the Gulf Racing Porsche. So we now have in the top half dozen 4 Porsche 911s, 1 Corvette and 1 Aston Martin. The Corvette is the Roman Grosjean team car, R8G esports team of Danny Juncadella. He's 4th, Richard Westbrook 5th, and 95 Aston, which is the Aston Martin Racing Team lead car. There's your race leader in the GTE class though, Tommy Østgaard, and that is the 64 Aston Martin, Corvette rather, that is Dennis Lind. So that is the car that has just been passed. And the man who did the passing for Gulf Racing is Adam Maguire, their Irish driver. So Adam moving them up to 6th, and I think that's certainly when I've been on air, as high as that car has been. They had a little issue earlier on. Ben Barker spun in the first hour, cost them a bit of time, but they have got plenty of pace in that car, and that, like the other Porsches, is rising relentlessly up the order.
Yeah,
oh, blimey, a big twitch from the big vet there. I hope that was I hope that was not too much of a surprise to Dennis Lind, the driver. Dennis Lind, single-seater ace turned GT racer, and a real sim racing speed merchant as well aboard the 64 car.
Yep, Dennis Lind actually set up the Singularity race team, so Dennis has a lot of experience in sim racing, and that Singularity team did very well in the VEC Championship. They actually won their 24-hour race last week and took the title in the LMP2 class as well. So Dennis knows what he's doing in single-seater racing, and he knows how to manage that Singularity race team as well. One thing he would be very good at is putting a strategy together and constructing a team, putting a team together. He would have helped Corvette pick this team for this event. So it's no surprise to see them slowly rising up the order. I'd say definitely watch out for that car the later we get into this race. As much as I say that the Porsches just look incredibly quick out front, but Dennis Lind, it's no surprise to see them doing as well as they are.
64 car there, real-world drivers, Tommy Milner, Jan Magnussen, and Mags has been part of the Corvette racing team for a long while now. The name for me that's missing is Ollie Gavin. Ollie Gav is, by his own admission, not really a sim racer, so I think he's kind of, okay guys, if you really need somebody to take a penalty, I'll do it, but you know, expect a Gareth Southgate, you know, get somebody else in. So Tommy Milner and Jan Magger in the 64 car, Jordan Taylor and Nicky Katzberger in 63. Now, Nicky Katzberg last year was a BMW factory driver in the M8. He's just finished the IMSA series in an M8, but he is a newly signed up member for Corvette Racing's real world team. So he will go to Le Mans in September for Corvette Racing. So Nicky Katzberg, who races in the World Touring Car Championship as well for Hyundai, is also racing for Corvette in the real world and the virtual world. And he was really looking forward to this race when I spoke to him last week. He's at home with his wife and his 1-year-old daughter and getting lots of time in on the sim rig. So he and those guys in the 63 car, they had problems early on as well, and they're a little further back than they would like to be. They're in 10th place. Again, we're still in the first half of this race, and as you heard from Doug Feehan, the boss of Corvette Racing early on, we've won some races with breaks that came our way, and we've lost some with breaks that went away from us, and Le Mans was ever thus, and we're still a long way from deciding who's going to get the trophies at the end of this one.
They've got a very strong driver in that team, Lorenz Heinrich. He's had some single-seater and GT experience in his background, but his esports experience has been extremely impressive, particularly over the last 3 years, with wins on this very circuit at Nürburgring and Bathurst as well in 12-hour races around that. And he also took the 2020 Neo Endurance Championship. So he's a very strong presence in that team, which makes that team a very good, very strong outfit altogether.
Okay, looking at our number 4 car. This is Jesper Pedersen, the Dane, back at the wheel of the Bajkoles Burst Esport car. I was started on pole position. Tom Dillman raced away at the start a little too excitedly and caused himself a drive-through penalty. But they recovered from that, from 12th place back up into the lead group. And that number 4 car from Bajkoles is still in the top 4. Headlights are flashing to the GT cars. Out the way, Sunbeam. Race leader is Raffaele Marcello for Rebellion Williams Esport in car number 1. Second and third in the pits, Ollie Rowland for 2Cs Motorsport, and Jack Aitken, another single-seater refugee, for Rebellion Williams in their 13 car. Jack Aitken was about maybe a year, maybe 2 behind Ollie Rowland coming up the junior single-seater ladder. I think he was in 2-litre Formula Renault when Ollie had moved up to Formula Renault 3.5 and kind of, you know, that 1 season step behind. So Jack, again, finding his feet very well indeed with this number 13 car and racing strongly. They've just dipped into the pits. They're on their out laps. Jesper Pedersen 4th. Jean-Eric Verne is 5th. He's in the number 24 car now for Veloce Esports. And in 6th position is the number 3 Rebellion Williams car. And that is currently being driven by Arthur Rougier, the Frenchman, one of their real-world drivers.
Going back to Jack Aitken, I actually raced Jack Aitken in karting, Martin. I'm pretty sure he still talks about that now.
I'm pretty sure he does.
He tells the stories of the brilliant...
If we gave him a microphone, I'm sure he would regale us with tales.
We had some good races at Wilton Mill back in the day, and it was great to see just how well from that point he went on to do. He really quickly rose through the ranks, I think, Jack Aitken, and he's got a fantastic career ahead of him, I'm sure. But yeah, let's get a microphone in front of him tomorrow and let's just talk about let's see how long he can go on for, because we might not have long enough to talk about all the stories he hasn't been.
Well, that's on the list obviously for Haley tomorrow morning. We will get Jack Aitken on Skype and say, hey, Chris McCarthy's here, why don't you two get a room and talk about all of your great cars? But you see, you know, it's one of those truisms, isn't it, about motor racing, is that you'll race with somebody in one category and not see them again for years. But the fact you spent a season in close proximity quite often, even though you're racing against each other and not teammates, you've got that bond in common. And I often think that being in a racing championship is a bit like being in a film. You're all pushed together from various different corners for one task, shoot a film or race in a championship, and then you're spread to the 4 wins. You might not meet up for months or years, but you've got that bond in common, and you've got tales each other. Oh, I remember when, you know, and that goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And you will, if you continue in the business, bump into people, and those threads will interlink and will cross again and again and again. The same names come back into your life time and again, whether you're racing, watching racing, talking about racing, producing TV pictures about racing, whatever it is, it's never done. There's always the same names and faces end up coming back sooner or later. I've
had that experience doing commentating. You know, I've turned up at events and drivers that I've commentated on. It's like, I remember, yeah, when we raced many years ago, or you see drivers out there that are now mechanics, for example, and then you meet up in a paddock 10 years after you raced each other, and it's like, oh, look at how we both ended up. So, yeah, it's something I think we will see a lot of in this grid. Imagine the amount of stories between all of these drivers of when they raced each other throughout various different categories.
Well, everybody who's in this race has that one unique thing. 99% of them won't have seen any of the others. Well, not quite 99%, but about 80% of the drivers in the race won't have seen any of the other drivers in the build-up, the preparation, the testing, or anything except on you know, their iPad, on Skype or whatever. They won't have seen them in the flesh. So it's going to be a really weird sensation. Look at this. This is not a battle for position as far as I can tell. There's nobody close enough. I think this is a lapping battle, but boy, that's as close as you get, isn't it? And this is phenomenally tight racing.
And just going back to what you said there, the first esports event I ever did, I remember turning up and it was a LAN event, which means everyone that comes to a studio, for example, and all the rigs are set up there for them to race. And I was speaking to the drivers, and it was bizarre because they knew each other so well, but it was the first time they had all ever met each other. And I remember speaking to two drivers, and they said, we've raced against each other for 10 years, and this is the first time that we're actually meeting each other and seeing each other in the flesh. And it was a very bizarre experience, but also a really good moment to witness, I have to say, as well. And I hope for all these sim drivers, they get that chance to actually meet each other and race each other in the flesh.
Yeah. Well, Larry Tenforda in the TDS racing car was the number 46 car in the middle of that little group, still trying to identify, Tenforda on his outlap, still trying to identify who went by him. And I think it was the Team Penske car. So who's in the Penske car? Simon Pagenaud also on an outlap, so that's why they were so close together, because they may well have just come out of the pits together, and that's why, yeah, it's Pagenaud in the Penske car. Whoa, swapping, and there's 3 wide, we're going 3 wide down into the chicane. So Pagenaud, that's Larry Tenforda. Who was the car in the middle? I thought that might have been, is that one of the Toyotas that just charged by them? Because I think the second set of headlights there, that's the Penske car. The third set of headlights, that's Larry Tenforda. So who's the car in front? Is that the WRT car? I'm trying to identify from bits of black rear end and not much else.
Is that the TDS car, or?
Tenforda's in the TDS car, which has got the Jumbo Supermarket livery up the fin.
It could be the E-Team WRT.
The WRT, I think it might be.
Yeah.
I think it might be.
That's an educated guess from me. That's
so who's
not
in that?
confirmation,
Dries Van Toor, also on an outlap. Well, Brendan Hartley's in the 8 Toyota. That's not it. That's the WRT car. Oh, and Larry Tenforda goes by the Penske. So we're on board now with Simon Pagenaud. I think that's Larry Tenforda in front of us. That bright yellow, that's the Jumbo Supermarkets livery, and so that's the TDS eSport car. Oh, he's in the tone, he's got a bit of a run going, he's having a look.
Ah, that's the Jota car.
Oh, no, that is, that's Jota Red Lights. That's Will Stevens in 9th place. So that is Larry Tenforda, so it's not the Penske car, that's the Jota car that we're looking back from. That is Tenforda behind us. 46, the TDS racing car. So Larry Tenforda is 10th. Will Stevens is 9th. Is that a battle for position? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So the other car, again, now I'm completely lost and misidentified, and that's gone anyway. But this is a battle for position. So this is 9th and 10th. 9th and inches in American football parlance, and wow, Will Stevens almost ran into the back of that Porsche, had a big catch to gather the car up. Oh. But Tenforda couldn't get round because there's no room. The Porsche curves a remarkably narrow piece of racetrack. Not much real estate there to play with. That Porsche driver was lucky that Will Stevens had all his wits about him there. That could have been a big multi-car pileup.
Will Stevens hasn't been in the esports game for very long. I've actually commentated on him in the Isolation e-racing series, and he's been doing very well in that. But he was talking in that series when we spoke to him, just trying to get up to speed. And the one thing he talked about, Martin, in an interview, was that he said it's so difficult to put in the amount of practice that the sim racing drivers do, because he said they're doing 8 hours a day. You know, they've got other things, drivers, that they have to do, other commitments that they have to fill. And he said, I simply cannot find the time to be putting 8 hours of practice in a day.
Yeah, not and get the sleep that he needs to recover from all the training he's doing. So somewhere, yeah, you're burning the candle at both ends. And you know, for him, this is, yeah, he's taking a professional approach to it, but it is not his profession. So that does make a difference. He's got to make sure, most importantly of all, that he's ready for his next physical race, not necessarily his next e-sport race. So, yeah, that's a you know, a really valid point. But nevertheless, that battle is a quarter of a second between 37 in 9th and 46 in 10th position. That's pretty impressive stuff. Our race leader, though, Raffaele Marcello, starting to run away out front. 18.6 seconds now, the gap on the live timing that we have. Ahead of Ollie Rowland, Jack Aitken in 3rd place, another 10 seconds back. Jesper Pedersen 4th, a further 10 seconds back. And then in 5th position, Jean-Eric Verne. 6th is Arthur Rougier. 7th, Tristan Vautier, IndyCar driver and sports car racer for Panis AAA. 8th position is the number 23 Team Rocket car, and that, of course, is Jenson Button's team. And who's at the wheel of that? That is Matt Richards from Great Britain. And then this battle for 9th, Will Stevens, inches ahead of Larry Tenforder. Well, 0.8 of a second. That gap has opened up a fraction, but it is only a fraction. I think at the Cool Racing car ahead of us. And Cool Racing's one Barbier ahead of Brendan Hartley on the timing screens. And that could be the battle we're looking at, 20th and 21st. You can't see it on your timing screen. I think that is the Cool Racing car. That's definitely not a Toyota behind it, so that's not that battle that we're looking at here then. So, again, misidentifying cars, I'm afraid. Always tricky when you've got headlights and a whole new field delivery. So on board 15, so that's Mike Epps for Multimatic. It's the car that he shares with Andy and Seb Prio, one of our 3 father-son combos. Another one was